Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteus, and today we will be diving into an interesting discussion on the Gaza ceasefire deal. Tensions in the Middle East remain high as US envoy Steve Witkoff met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday. This visit comes amid growing diplomatic efforts to secure a ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza. Before meeting Netanyahu, Witkoff discussed peace steps with Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani. Following those talks, Netanyahu's office confirmed that Mossad chief David Barnea would travel to Qatar to advance hostage negotiations. In Tel Aviv, hundreds protested in the streets demanding an end to the war and resolution to the hostage crisis. Adding to tension, a billboard featuring US President-elect Donald Trump warned all of them 20-1 or the fire will break open. The Israeli military also confirmed the loss of 4 soldiers in northern Gaza, raising the death toll to 403 since the ground offensive began. For this discussion, we are joined by Ross Feingold, political analyst in Taipei, Lev Aran, former coordinator of Israel-India Parliamentary Friendship League in Israel, and Professor Rohan Gunaracha, Middle East Affairs expert in Singapore. Thank you very much for joining us. My first question to start this conversation off, I want to talk about ceasefire negotiations and the current state of them. So, Lev Aran, my first question to you is what steps is Israel taking to demonstrate goodwill in ceasefire negotiations, and how does this align with its goal to dismantle Hamas's military?
First of all, thank you for hosting me. It looks closer than ever because Donald Trump said he wants to finish the war, to end the war. And also Trump told the Palestinians, the Hamas, they cannot keep the hostages. So Netanyahu needs to decide if he wants a deal with Hamas. Now, a deal with Hamas means that the total victory that he promised cannot be fulfilled. And he knows it. On the other hand, Trump, unlike Kamala Harris, is very popular in Israel. So if Trump is the one leader who supports the deal, I don't see a way that Netanyahu will run away from the deal. And the reason is that he needs good 4 years with Donald Trump. So since Netanyahu's skin is in the game, deep in the game, although his opponents say that he will never give up to a deal, because once there is a deal and the war ends, it means that they will inquire what happens on October 7th. On the other hand, if Trump wants a deal, it means also that Netanyahu needs to start relationship with Trump on a goodwill step and bringing the hostages back home, or at least part of them.
And Lev, that's what I wanted to go on to next. My next question is for Ross Feingold. As a key mediator, what measures is the US implementing to ensure both parties honour any potential ceasefire agreement?
We saw this recently with the ceasefire in Lebanon, where the United States and a number of countries were active in the negotiations. I'm not sure if I would use the word guarantor, but they definitely played the role of saying we're going to ensure that both sides adhere to the ceasefire. Of course, in Lebanon, it's augmented by the role of UN peacekeepers who are there in theory to keep the two sides apart. Also, the Lebanese National Army is supposed to deploy to southern Lebanon as well to enforce the ceasefire. So we don't have those options in Gaza, but we do have other countries that are involved as well, such as Qatar, such as Egypt. So I think it would operate along a similar line where there are a number of countries who are telling both sides, who are telling Hamas and Israel, separately telling them that we're going to make sure that the opposite side to you is fulfilling and is following the terms of any ceasefire agreement.
Professor Rohan Gunaracha, I wanted to look at the other side here. And do you believe Hamas's insistence on a complete Israel withdrawal from Gaza strengthens or weakens its negotiating position?
Israel will maintain a presence because the security of Israel is central. Of course, the hostage issue is currently the most critical matter that Israel must resolve. But if you look at the security and safety of Israel and Israeli citizens, they will need to maintain certain structures and capabilities to prevent another attack. So there is a significant understanding within the Israeli military intelligence and security community that Hamas should be dismantled. Although they have had tremendous success of attacking Hamas military and governance structures, Hamas continues to regenerate. Hamas continues to recruit and radicalize and build its capabilities while the IDF fighting is continuing. But at this point, because President-elect Trump is moving in a certain direction, I believe that everyone will fall in line and they will move towards a ceasefire.
Leveran, I wanted to come to you on how would you address concerns that a partial ceasefire could allow Hamas to regroup militarily?
I think the big question is what Hamas wants to be, because what Hamas claimed to its domestic audience, they said, we are here only to fight Israel. UNRWA and the international community, they are in charge of the health facilities, of food and everything else. We are here in Gaza only to confront Israel and to end the Israeli occupation. When they say Israeli occupation, they mean whole of Israel. It means that Israel does not have the right to exist. So if Hamas wants to be again body that only has a guerrilla against Israel, I think Israel will not let it happen again after October 7th. If Hamas wants to rule, let's say, the more civic sides of the Palestinian population in Gaza, this is a different question, because we know that also Palestinian Authority wants to prove that they can govern Gaza. There is idea from the Emirates that maybe they can be partners in Gaza as part of the New Deal in Gaza. So it is too early to say, but the big question is, what is the backbone of Hamas? Who is the new Hamas after their defeat by Israel? This was the same question about Taliban after they won and they came to power in Afghanistan, and it is the same question in Gaza.
I want to move the conversation on from the ceasefire talks to now the humanitarian impact of what's going on in Gaza. We have over 46,000 reported dead Palestinians throughout this whole crisis. Ross Feingold, I want to ask you, should the US impose conditions on military aid to Israel to ensure compliance with international humanitarian standards?
The reality is that's probably not going to happen. So we saw periodic criticism from the Biden administration, but the Biden administration certainly did not stop the flow of arms to Israel. President Trump, based on his first term and the early movements of his second term, is once again going to follow a policy of being very close and very supportive of Israel. He has a very good personal relationship with Netanyahu, especially. He's very invested, I would say, in supporting Israel. Even though in the last election he still got less than 30% of the Jewish American vote, which is pretty consistent with past American presidential elections. Maybe he did a little bit better than Republicans usually do with Jewish Americans. But be that as it may, he's still very invested in a strong support for Israel. His evangelical base are big supporters of Israel. So I think we're going to see Trump not really demand those kinds of trade-offs from Israel.
Professor Gunaratra, I wanted to ask you, how do neighbouring Arab nations view their responsibility in providing humanitarian aid to Gaza? And what is the future of this?
The Arab countries Muslim countries will certainly continue to provide assistance. They have been providing assistance, but most of those countries do not want this kind of terrorist attack. They have seen that what Hamas staged is a terrorist attack, and Hamas abducted more than 200 Israelis and other foreign citizens on that day, on October 7th, 2023. So they are not identifying with Hamas for its acts of violence. In fact, they have always instructed or advised and requested Hamas to release the hostages. So, but they will continue, these Arab countries, Muslim countries will continue to support the Palestinian cause, meaning a two-state solution, and they will continue to provide humanitarian assistance.
Lev Aran, I was wondering, how does Israel justify the alleged humanitarian blockade in northern Gaza, as conditions there obviously get colder? There are reports of children freezing to death. I believe there's been reported statistics of 70 children being killed there in the last 5 days. These reports have come from within Gaza. How do you respond to that?
Let's not talk about Israel, but about Trump and Netanyahu, because they are the leaders. And I think the humanitarian situation and the death toll in Gaza is simply irrelevant to the core argument of both Netanyahu and Trump. As far as they are concerned, Hamas is to be blamed for what happened in Gaza. Hamas can end the war by giving back the hostages, the bodies of those that he murdered, and the living persons who are still in the tunnels. So I don't think that Trump or Netanyahu think that the death toll or the humanitarian situation in Gaza is because of Israel. So, and of course, we also have a left-leaning opposition in both America and Israel, but right now their opposition, they are not part of the coalition. So the two leaders see Hamas as the only body that should be blamed for the tragedy in Gaza.
Ross, I wanted to come to you on this next one. Do you think the US is doing enough to address this alleged humanitarian crisis in Gaza, or should it approach its shift to prioritize aid?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it comes up all the time with tragedies like civil wars or famines, natural disasters all over the world in many different places, whether that's in Africa or other parts of the Middle East. Here in Asia, there's a terrible civil war going on in Myanmar right now. So it's always easy to say that the international community, and specifically the United States as the leader of the free world, should be doing more. But that's often an observation made from a great distance. As we've been discussing in this program, a lot of the blame really does belong to Hamas. They initiated this war. They refused to surrender. They refused to reach a deal with Israel. And the northern Gaza is a war zone right now. So that makes it very difficult to send in aid. It's an active war zone. There's fighting going on every day. And until that fighting stops, it makes it very difficult to provide aid. And that's kind of the situation that has been present in this dispute for many, many months already. But again, I don't think the United States is going to look to impose any conditions on Israel, certainly not under the new Trump administration.
Okay, now we will move on to the regional dynamics between the Middle East. Professor Rohan Gunarachna, how do you assess the risk of the Gaza conflict escalating into wider regional war involving multiple countries? Do you think that this ceasefire is too close to being done for this to happen?
The Gaza war has already created a bigger conflict. In fact, Israel had to fight 7 actors, what you call the ring of fire. The Houthis, the Ansarullah group in Yemen, the Hezbollah, the group in Lebanon, the entities in Syria and Iraq, as well as Iran itself, and of course the threat from Gaza. So the regional dynamics have changed very significantly. It is because of Israel's decapitation of Hezbollah leadership that resulted in the Syrian regime falling and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham capturing power. Iran itself, many of the air defenses have been dismantled, and we are seeing that Turkey is emerging as a powerful entity in the region. Israel itself has demonstrated that it is the regional power. You can even call it a regional superpower in terms of its military capabilities. The Arab countries continues to support, especially the countries in the Gulf, have continued to support the Abraham Accords. And I personally believe that with Trump coming to power, there will be a return to stability. Iran itself will be under very severe threat because Trump doesn't want Iran to build a nuclear capability. Israel do not want Iran to build a nuclear capability. So we will have a new Middle East.
Going on from this, Levaran, does Israel risk alienating potential Arab allies by expanding military operations beyond Gaza?
There is a lot of hypocrisy and doublespeak among the Arab leaders. I think on air, when they give interviews, they will give full support to the Palestinian cause, and they will blame Israel for the tragedy in Gaza. But we saw that when Iran attacked Israel twice, there was a big gap between, let's take Jordan, between the harsh words of the Jordanian establishment, especially wife of the king, and the way they protected Israel with their own soldiers. So Gaza was the only place that the Muslim brothers actually were, they were the elite in this place. They were the prime minister, the president, and so on. The other place was Egypt, and the army kicked out the Muslim brothers in Egypt, and now we have Assisi. So mostly Arab countries do not want Hamas to control Gaza. I don't think they believe that the Palestinian Authority has the ability to control right now the West Bank. And the best way for them to keep some kind of stability in the Middle East is, on one hand, using very harsh words and scolding Israel every day, and on the other hand, quietly helping Israel against Hamas.
Ross, I wanted to come on to this last question in this section. What should the US push for broader regional summit to access the interconnected conflicts in the Middle East, including Yemen and Gaza?
Probably won't see that anytime soon. President Trump's style, at least from his first term, he's not a big fan of multilateral organizations or multilateral initiatives. He prefers the one-on-one approach, and that's why we saw his special envoy for the Middle East is getting a head start with a week left in the Biden administration by flying to Israel and the region and starting to meet leaders and introduce himself and begin to talk about the way forward. So I think Trump is going to rely heavily on that approach, using his special envoy, U.S. ambassadors in the different countries. If some of these leaders one-on-one come to Washington, D.C. in the coming months to meet with Trump one-on-one, that shouldn't be a surprise either. But convening a big summit where Trump has to take the lead because it would be the U.S. that convened it, it's possible, but I would call that unlikely.
I want to move on to the next section now, which is the hostage situation going on in Gaza. 96 hostages still remain there, 34 of which are assumed dead by Israel. In the past 2 days, we have had 2 bodies discovered, a father and a son. For this one, I wanted to ask Rohan Gunaratne, does Hamas's handling of the hostage situation undermine its claims of representing the Palestinian cause?
Hamas has no credibility in the eyes of the world for what they have done. Firstly, by killing so many civilians on October 7th, kidnapping Israelis and foreign citizens, and also raping and committing sexual offenses when they did that attack. So I think that it is labeled a terrorist group, and it's a question of time that Hamas will be phased out by the Arab countries, the Muslim countries, and even by the Palestinian people. Hamas has governed Gaza with an iron grip, and sooner or later Hamas will be replaced. But of course, it is so important for Israel to work with the international community, to work especially with the Arab and the Muslim countries, to ensure that there's a two-state solution in the future, because stability and security of Israel and the Palestinian people is essential for there to be peace in the region. So although Hamas is on its way out, governments will have to think who will be the next actor. Will it be the Palestinian Authority that will eventually govern not only the West Bank, but also Gaza? Can they be strengthened? Can they be reinforced and fortified so that they will emerge as the credible state actor for the Palestinian people?
Lev Aran, I want to come to you for this next one. Is Israel open to prisoner exchanges with Hamas, and what precedent does this set for future conflicts?
I think in Israel the demand, acceptability, and also support for a deal with Hamas is very high. Even you see the voices, you hear the voices in the coalition that say we need to get the hostages back at any price. So if Netanyahu decides to go for a deal, even if he's needs to swallow the humiliation that he didn't get the total victory that he promised for so long, I think he will survive it politically, and most of his coalition, as well as all of the opposition and a majority of, I think, more than 70% of the Israeli population, they want Netanyahu to sign a deal to have the hostages back, even if it means that we did not achieve the things that we wanted to achieve with Hamas. And I agree, Hamas did terrible things. They murdered and raped and so on. But right now, what most of us want is to see the hostages back, and even the ones that were murdered by the Hamas, and we will get only their bodies. We want the families to have a grave, to cry, to understand that they can start new life. So right now, Netanyahu has a consensus to sign a deal with the Hamas via Qatar, Egypt, Trump, and so on.
Thank you very much. We have unfortunately ran out of time. I want to thank all our guests, Ross Feingold, Lev Aran, and Professor Rohan Gunaratne. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. That is all we have time for now. We will continue to bring more news updates from the war and the rest of the world. Thank you very much.